March 4th, 2024. I'm Mark Weber, the Computer History Museum, here with Brewster Kahle, pioneer of information, AI, search, all sorts of things. So could you state your name and then in just a couple of sentences explain to a general public visitor your expertise and interest in AI and today's chatbots?
Let's start with this is public domain. Use it for whatever. So I'm Brewster Kahle, founder and digital librarian of the Internet Archive. And we've got a fascinating time now of chatbots chatting it up with millions of people and learning from those interactions. We're living in the future.
And your qualifications? Do you know something about AI, I think.
So since 1980, I've been preparing for this. Where at the MIT Artificial Intelligence Lab, we were dreaming of making machines that are worth having a conversation with. But we were data starved. We didn't have the information. So I thought, okay, how hard could it be to go and just put everything ever published online and make it so that the machines could learn from it? If we're going to build our new overlords, then we should have read good books. Those were the heady times of the 1980s.
So let's jump into how are chatbots affecting how we retrieve knowledge now, and how follow up how we author or share it, both to retrieve it and create it.
The artificial intelligence up until now has been restricted to kind of the Google searches in large part. So we go and type something in and it would try to give us a list back. But now there's starting to be chatbots that are trying to put it in context, that are responsive to what it is the question asker is wanting to hear. It's much richer type of interaction, and it's becoming very popular.
Do you think it's changing the way people are engaging with information now already?
The generative AIs are starting to make it so that people are using them for first drafts, for legal briefs, for thank you notes, for all sorts of things. And that's got its ups and downs to it, but it is at least getting people to write more. Even if it's just starting with a first draft, hopefully they're continuing to change and improve what the machines come out with.
Do you feel it's a return to a more natural way of interacting with information, like, the way children ask questions of adults, or maybe hunter-gatherers would ask an elder? Is conversation more natural?
The chatbots are much more natural and responsive, so you can actually ask for help and it'll actually give you help, and not documents that have help in the headline. I mean, we're starting to get so that it's a little bit more like how you'd actually ask questions of people. And what's amazing is sometimes it's so much deeper and smarter than people, and sometimes it's so much more kind of inane and flat and stupid.
How important is the cross-cultural, cross-language reach of generative AI?
Some of the promises of these generative AIs is that they can go and use materials that were published in completely different languages and try to make them relevant to you by translating into your own language. That's a win. Can we go and make it so that the dream of having the library on your desktop comes true in a real way that can be used by millions? That's the offer that's on the table. And in many ways, it's getting there pretty well.
So will we need books then? Or just let the chatbot create your own custom material?
Will this be the death of books? Don't think so, but it might be the augmentation of books. So instead of going and reading a review of a book, you might ask the book questions so that it can summarize itself in new and different ways. I kind of think it would be interesting to have a book be immediately made into a little movie. So if you wanted to not just have an audiobook version, what would be the imagery that would come out of it? Wouldn't that be kind of cool? I think we're just at the beginning of this.
And do you see in your work with, I mean, the world's archive, really, for the last decades, generative AI playing a role in classification, some of the things that used to be done by hand?
The Internet Archive has been building a library that people have been peeking and poking into, and we're starting to do text and data mining and translation and interesting things. This generative AI is just another pass of how you can go and use the sum of all world's knowledge for better and interesting purposes.
And can it help with a kind of classification of that enormous corpus that would have required human effort before?
We're already using these AI technologies to help us catalog and segment and summarize the materials that are in our libraries. Our libraries are so vast that people just are like, they don't want to deal with it. But if we can go and use these technologies to help, and we are already, then it can improve the navigability of even the original texts that people have written over the years.
And will we need human crowdsourcing like Wikipedia?
The benefits of some of these generative AIs is they get to learn from all sorts of things, whether it's AI or from Wikipedia or from books or from interactions with people. Then how do we go and represent that in such a way that lots of different interfaces and not just one large corporation or a few big ones start to dominate? Can we go and use these to make democratized collections of generative AI technologies? That's some of the big puzzle that's coming out now.
And did chatbots change the business models around? I mean, current business models for statistical AI include serving ads, charging for subscriptions. Do you see generative AI changing? Do we need new business models? Or we need them anyway, but I'm saying, is it going to demand changes in that?
Early days in generative AI and chatbots, and how these things will become to be used, and will they become trusted? I mean, if things can kind of slant things one way or another or exert biases, um, how are we going to go and know that those are happening? Exert some influence on it, regulate it, charge for it? No idea. Early days, but people are very excited because it's starting to be useful already.
So, could you help? I want to ask you a bit about explainability and accuracy, which you're touching on. Could you help the general public visitor understand the issue of explainability with today's large language models?
Right now, these things are pretty black boxes, and it's even surprising the scientists and the engineers that are making them how good their responses are. How do these things work? And did we have all of that information and that intelligence built into the language that it's learning from? Seems to be. But we needed to go and quote where its sources are coming from and citations. That was the great thing about the search engines, another major AI accomplishment in the last couple decades. They would always go and say where it is you should go see, why it thinks you should go see this thing. But these generative AIs, well, they just kind of state them as true. And that's not a good place to be, because why does it think that? We're going to need more than where we are now.
And what about the production of falsehoods stated with conviction?
These AIs aren't really sure yet of what the implications are of what it is that it's spouting. So it's not a very self-reflective set of technologies. So it's stating things as true when sometimes it's just hallucinating and making things up. We often use these anthropomorphic terms like hallucination or making things up when these are just coming out of these large statistical models. Maybe we're already starting to put too much human capability into our assumptions of what's coming back.
The Eliza effect. So, do you feel that LLM chatbots are stochastic parrots that only give the appearance of understanding. There are some people think that they are emergent learners that actually do understand, in some sense, things about the world.
One of the great things about these chatbots is we're starting to understand what understanding means, right? We have these things that we can kind of poke and probe and try things out and do experiments on that we never really want to do on people. And I think the whole philosophy of understanding and the philosophy of thought is going to make leagues forward in the very, very near future. That's exciting. Let's understand what it is to be thinking.
And how about the issue of bias and bigotry in the text generated by?
These AIs are just learning from what it is they see. And as we've seen with kids that are raised on social media and the like, they'll learn from whatever they can get access to. And what we're feeding some of these bots is not so great. And there's a lot of fights among those that want to keep it so that they're not going to read the best things that people have all had to offer. That's not a great state of affairs. We're going to need a mechanism of going and having everyone learn and all bots learn the best materials that we have. Otherwise, we're going to end up with biased, weird, not very smart technologies.
Could you elaborate on that? I mean, what happens if chatbots can't read books, in essence?
We need our chatbots to learn the important lessons of what it is we as people have discovered. And it should go and incorporate these into their models so that they put out as good advice or suggestions or knowledge as we can. They need to learn from the best that people have created, not just the dribble. That's going to be meaning opening up in our libraries to let the robots read. This is the only way we're going to have good robots out there. And I use plural very importantly. We can't just have one or two. We need hundreds. We need every library, every book, every educational institution to be able to have potentially their own bots to go and express what it is their points of view are. Only in that way will we have an evolution of different ideas of what's true and not true. If we end up with just one winner, we will all lose.
So, what about trust in the organizations that make these technologies? And I guess really how many of them there are and whether it's monopolized.
People are using the word trust a lot these days. Can we trust the organizations? What are we trying to trust them to do exactly? I think we should trust them to be true to their missions, whether it's corporate, profits, educational mission. Libraries as information is kind of a relatively raw resource. Museums to go and give points of view and storytelling using artifacts. We can trust organizations, hopefully, to be true to how they were organized. But that means that we need lots of different LLMs, generative AIs, to provide different perspectives, different approaches, and things that we can really trust that they will be doing for us as opposed to manipulate us.
The problem with the web has been that there's no built-in method of preservation, and that's a gap that you've really been one of the only people to fill. Do you think that the value of training data might give a certain value to the kind of information that's currently discarded, even if only for commercial purposes?
I don't understand what you're asking.
Are people going to throw out a GeoCities today when it could be used to train future chatbots? Is this going to actually make people value archives more?
I think people have always seen the value in libraries and archives. They just haven't seen it as their problem. So we have publishers that are going out and trying to make the new thing. It's great. But they should let the archives go into archives like the Internet Archive or the Library of Congress or universities so that they can be used and cared for in new and different ways. In our digital world, we're starting to have the license model where things get never released to the public for things to be used within the rule of law. They're always under contract. And this restrictions that are going on now in the publishing industry is starting to strangle our libraries and archives in the digital era. This would be a terrible outcome, especially at a time when actually libraries and archives are even more useful towards giving a perspective than they ever have.
Any thoughts on privacy and security around chatbots?
People are interacting with chatbots as if they're other people and actually kind of trusted therapist type people. This is a little terrifying given that these materials are going into these large scale AI models and they can be tracked down to individuals. So I think we're going to need to have some media literacy, if you will, such that we know how we should interact with them and also which ones we should trust. Let's build some public AIs, some ones that we know are on our side.
And easy authoring was lost on the early web when editing was gotten rid of in browsers. Do you think can generative AI make it easier for ordinary people to contribute as well as passively absorb?
The wonder of the early internet was it was a network publishing system. So everyone could go and try to write their own materials and add it to the library that was this big thing that we're building. Okay, it was a little clunky, it was blogs or the like, but then it all started to move on into these corporate platforms, whether it's GeoCities, uh, Facebook, Twitter, and those guys are free to go and take it all down and or go out of business or change their business. So that made us so we couldn't even have concentration in confidence that our materials were going to last as long as our paper background used to allow us to. With these AI interactions, they're completely fleeting, and they're where are they going, and who owns and controls them, and can you get them back? So I think we have actually an opportunity for more data loss, that we make it so that we're not leaving a history if we move so much into this into this realm where everything is just a conversation as opposed to writings that are meant to last.
What most excites you about chatbots and this technology moving into the future?
These chatbots are very interesting and deeply useful. I have no idea how do they work. I'm an AI researcher from way, way back, been building these digital libraries for this exact purpose. But how does it able to go and make these um, advice on how to go and program and or fill in some obscure formula in a spreadsheet? I mean, it's pretty wild how far they've come. What I'm excited is it's so publicly exposed. A lot of these technologies have been available to specialists doing facial recognition and creepy things like that, where we didn't realize what it is that's going on. At least these generative AIs, a lot of it's happening in the public sphere. And that's kind of exciting. So I think we get to participate and hopefully get to shape the future that we want to live in.
And what do you see as their greatest potential harm?
The harms of mass manipulation of people, I think, is real and should be concerning. That how swayable people were based on just generic advertising that went out over magazines and newspapers and television, of how compelling those were. Or if you take television broadcasts that are so convincing, but even though they're spread over millions, what happens when things become customized and they can learn your foibles and engender your trust? How easy is it going to be to manipulate people? I think it's going to be frighteningly easy.
And Some people are talking about apocalypse and human extinction in connection to this. Others are talking about a kind of utopia. What do you think of these conversations?
I'm glad that people are talking about it so early on in this conversation of what the harms and benefits can be. That we don't really know where it's going. It's still up to humans to decide the path. Let's take this time and do our jobs well. And it will be uh, positively informed by people being concerned and being excited about some of the new possibilities. But let's go and be able to keep the reins on these technologies to make sure that it coming out right for a free and open people. Um, we can have people that are motivated towards very different outcomes than that, and they will try to use these tools as well. So whether it's overreach of corporations or of governments, um, we will see the good, the bad, and the ugly in this technology as we have in others.
So, do you think we're worried about the right things?
Whenever there's a jarring new technology or an event, you get to see what people are really made out of. Like what's important to them, what's not important to them. Whether it's making money or taking control or getting elected or what their dreams are. Are we now going to have a voice when we didn't before? So sometimes these new technologies are the perfect time to look and see what people are and what they want out of their technologies. Because inevitably the technologies are going to disappoint us, whether it's television or the fax machine or even the World Wide Web. It wasn't everything that we hoped it would be. But what I find interesting is the dreams people have coming into these new technologies. That's what's really important. Let's go and if we don't make it through in this generation technology, let's make sure we remember those dreams and build it into the next generation. Because right now there's lots of hopes and fears about this new thing as it goes through. It will start to become understood and categorized and put in its place. But we will still have our dreams that are unfulfilled by technology, and that's the next mandate for the next generation makers.
So, you talked about people and seeing what's really what they're made of. So, I've heard the quip when you hear AI, look for the people, or AI is people. Is that true of today's chatbots? I mean, the people that train it, the people that training, it's channeling in a sense things we've all created. Just talk about how much of what we see is really the machine and how much is the people that it's training on and are correcting its responses.
Of course, all the inputs to these models are human generated materials. And so it starting with that, but it'll start to be able to make new connections and new ways, things that you wouldn't be able to see unless you had kind of all together. In the same way that mathematics made real steps forward when we could compute lots of different possibilities. I think we're going to see real assistance from these AIs in doing our everyday research and work. And we'll be continuously surprised by what it is that you can get if you've read the whole library. We don't have time to read the library, but our machines do. I think there'll be surprising things that come out of it, and often quite positive.
Some people feel that, right now we're riding this wave of deep learning. There are people that think we need to combine it with old symbolic stuff or that we need totally different approaches. Then, Jeff Hawkins has another set of models for AI. And where do you think that just throwing more data at deep learning will get us where we want to go, or do we need different approaches?
New technologies are going to need new technologists, new ways of thinking, but now vast data sources seem to be the real key. When back in the early 1980s in AI, we tried to go and put together sort of the ultimate graph of information of what words meant and the like. And actually, we made much more progress by just throwing a lot of materials in and just kind of filtering it around with search engines and the like. So, as simple algorithms, lots of data. I don't think we've seen the end of that approach. At some point, we are going to need to have more nuance. But right now, that approach is working out better than others.
And you've been credited with coming up with the term big data. So, and you've said this a couple of times. So, how important is these massive explosions of data to making this stuff work?
All the studies that I've read has shown that if you double the amount of data, it gets incrementally better, and 10 times even better. That's not always the case. With early search engines, it was really easy to just have too much information and you just kept finding bad stuff. So you actually just wanted to have a small amount of good information. Google fixed that. They had a mechanism of taking all sorts of things and still finding good stuff out of it. I think we now have this technology with these large language models that is in exactly the same state, that more computation and more data is better for these. It gives them new approaches, new answers, and the like that are in fact helping. That's not been the case for very long. We haven't known how to use these massive compute collections, except for just making things faster. Now we can make things better with large scale computing. That's a breakthrough.
But that does use a lot of energy and water and things like that. Is AI environmentally sustainable?
AI is not an environmental hazard yet in terms of the amount of data center use that it is, though I've read that it's a few percent of all electricity go to data centers. So it's non-trivial, but it's not at that scale yet. And its utility would have to be worth spending those kinds of resources on it. That will be a real economic challenge. Are these AIs going to be so economically valuable that we will continue to increase the amount of energy resources that are going to them? That's unclear. Right now, there's still a very, very small percentage, but it would be an indication that they're becoming more and more useful.
So you think it's a better use of energy than Bitcoin?
Almost any use of energy is better than Bitcoin. Bitcoin started out with a bold idea, proved it, terrific. But now let's shift off of proof of work and go towards these more sophisticated proof of stake or whatever other technologies that doesn't use up a Norway full of electricity just to go and keep a database in consistent state. So one thing that we can count on is technologies will evolve. And as the cryptocurrencies evolve away from energy use, I think we'll find efficient, smaller, tidier AI systems that will just become embedded in your watch, your phone, your laptop, your doorknobs.
Can we regulate chatbots, and if so, how?
Regulating chatbots directly is going to be challenging. Um, Regulating the motivations of those that are putting it forward, that's where I think there'll be more benefit. For instance, can we go and make it so that there's not as much incentive to make killing machines and expanding our militaries that are now growing and growing and growing? Can we make it so that corporations have that might be smaller than they currently are so that they don't become as incentivized to control as much as the current, say, publishing system is? So how do we go and regulate our society and our institutions such that they use their technologies towards more benefit towards people? That would be the direction that I would go towards in trying to regulate these technologies, going and just counting computrons and regulating how many can be put forward in certain tasks. I think is going to be a game people will figure out how to work around if we don't change some of the motivations and structures that are exploiting these technologies.
And for jobs, I mean, do you see the chatbots more as augmenting or replacing? Which side do you, or both?
Robots or automation can only replace things that can be automated and robotized. So whatever those tasks that people were doing were based on manual effort or even cognitive effort, are only going to be replaced if they're replaceable by these machines. So where we may want people to continue doing things that are not really have a real point for them to do, at least it will become optional as the robots get to have those capabilities. But we have much more that we can do that's interesting as people than do some of the rote tasks that can be now automated. Whether they'll be automated in a new and better and different way with these AIs or just kind of substitutions for what it is we're doing, we'll have to wait to see.
If you could create your own chatbot, what would it do?
I would like to see climate GPT. I would like to see us use the collective works of humankind to go and put into this new technologies to try to solve some of the big problems we've got. For instance, climate change. How do we go and make some real effective change to the trajectory that we're on? And can we go and use our technologies to help in the big problems? Healthcare, climate change come to mind.
And what is the most important thing for everyone to understand about chatbots?
Chatbots are still built by you and me, by people. It can be shaped, it can be made better, different, whatever. So dive in, try using things, seeing what it does, what it doesn't do. Get involved. Going and just hiding in a hole is not going to work. These things are taking off. So let's get somewhat involved, understand what it is and isn't, and where we can go and place this technology in the pantheon of powerful technologies that humans have built. That's the opportunity and the challenge for us all.
And what can we learn from the history of chatbots and of AI?
Maybe we could learn from chatbots and AI that what we know are long form narratives, our books, our papers, our experiences are valuable to be learned from. That going and recording what it is we've done, what we want to pass on, that is going to be increasingly important for next generations of people and technologies to learn from. That this is an opportunity to go and see the value in what it is we are as people. And I mean, it's just learning from us, and it's getting to be pretty interesting. Same kind of revelation when people are bringing up children or other organizations is they learn from what comes before. And we are that set of reservoir of ideas, values, dreams, ambitions. Let's see if we can go and make some of those come true using this new technology.
And do only if you want to comment on copyright around chatbots and some of the challenges there.
So lots of people, when there's a new technology there, want their piece of it. And there's a question of how much should you go and let, say, the copyright big publishers go and determine the directions that these take, or is it closer to end users to these? Or is it new technology companies, or is it the military, or is it the government? How are these going to be shaped? And different countries are going to come to different solutions. When we had the search engines, in the United States had a fairly laissez-faire approach toward it, and that's where the dot-com boom really came and stayed. Europe doesn't really have a search engine. Japan doesn't really have a search engine. But interestingly, Japan now has passed laws trying to make it so that robots can read in Japan. Maybe they learned that going and making all of that illegal or controlled by the copyright cartel led to a different path, and they want to repeat this next time. So we'll see as these large scale political areas, whether it's China or Russia, Europe, Southeast Asia, India, how do they all come down on this? Will determine what roles their countries play in these next 10, 15 years as these technologies are built out.
And some people are seeing like an arms race between China and the US around AI. I mean, do you think that's accurate, or is that, I mean, what's your feeling?
There's a rush everywhere between countries, between companies, between universities to really understand and use these technologies better. They'll reflect the values of the organizations that are investing in it. So I would like to see it extend the free expression of people, democratic values, fair, unbiased access to information. Will we get there? Depends on who builds it. So let's take a hand in building this technology.
Is there anything you want to add about chatbots, their impact already, or what you see down the road?
I'd like to see us use these chatbots to build public facilities that are trying to solve things, not just to try to get more ad dollars or whatever they're attempting to now. Can we build public AI research facilities? This would be an interesting step forward that I know I would like to be involved in, and the Internet Archive and a lot of the open world would like to be.
And as someone who's seen many generations of AI, is the generative aspect a surprise? Were you guys thinking decades ago about something that would create remix content the way generative AI does, or is that new?
For me, the generative AI aspect is completely surprising. That it's been able to go and do better on image analysis, to be able to do some of the self-driving car things. Those have been evolutions, or being able to do more and more complex games, going from chess to Go to Jeopardy. Those have been huge, positive, interesting, difficult leaps. But the idea that you could just talk to these and have them come back with such concrete responses, it's been really surprising to me, at least. And it's a new way that we may be interacting with our machines in the future.
Does that create like a partnership or a collaboration that's very different? That they become like a collaborator?
I think everyone's starting to have a smart assistant, somebody that can go and provide the first draft of what you're thinking of, or correct things, or suggest things that you might be able to cook out of the ingredients you have in your refrigerator. That there's an ease of interaction that is so informal and so humanly oriented that it means that we can be having discourse with our computers much more often than the typing that I grew up with in dealing with computers.
And last question is really historical, which is, you were part of what I see as a number of AI people that moved into the web. I mean, you, Marty Tenenbaum, there were people at DEC. I forget Ninja. I forget her last name at Yahoo. Came from Psych. Was there really? How important were former AI people to the growth of the web, to the development of the web?
A lot of the AI people that got into the web to try to help with the information overload problem. That we just had way too much information sort of flowing at us through these new and different ways. Now that we made everyone be able to be a publisher. So the search engines were absolutely required to have AI capabilities to be able to make it so you just get a page full of responses, as opposed to hundreds of pages of garbage. That's where the AI people have really shined so far. And now we may see another aspect of how these AI researchers can be benefiting, making sense of the information overload that is the current web.